There is nothing like winning in the National Hockey League, and the Edmonton Oilers picked up their first of the season last night against the Philadelphia Flyers, and here is everything you need to know.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. I want to thank everybody who is making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL, $20 off your first purchase. So, on today's very, very busy Wednesday edition of Locked On Oilers, we are going to talk all about how the Oilers put together their first win of the season. Our first segment, we're going to talk about that uncontrolled emotion you saw out of the Oilers last night. You saw some frustration, some aggressiveness start to simmer over from the slow start to the season. The wonkiness of this game did not help and really kind of facilitated this type of chaotic, frantic environment. Our second segment, we're going to talk about how the Oilers kind of won this game backwards in the perspective of who picked up the load and when they did in the game. And then our final segment, we are going to tie a bow on the Oilers' first win of the season by just evaluating how they put it all together. What worked for them in this game that hadn't worked in the previous three? So, starting at the outset, I felt that it was imperative for the Oilers to try and slow this game down and get to their basics. And that is very, very much not what the Oilers are about. The Oilers are not a cycle grinded out team. You know, they're not Carolina, they're not Florida, they're not, frankly, they're not the Flyers. They're not one of those teams that uses this mentality to kind of wear you out. And there just aren't a lot of teams in today's NHL that play this way. And you got to give a tip of the cap to the Flyers, who did a really good job defensively in this game. And we're going to talk about it in the second segment, how they did such a good job neutralizing McDavid, Draisaitl, and Hyman for such long stretches of the game. But I don't think we can tell the story of this game and really kind of put it together without understanding how a game takes its shape. Last night, you get that first Michikov goal, first career goal. This is a very talented player, but it's a deflating moment. You know, you come out, you got a little bit of energy, you put your big guns together. You got McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman with each other. You got Podkolzin up on that second line, who had a nice game. We're going to talk about Podkolzin later, but you put your big guns up together, and 5 minutes into this game, you're down a goal. And Kris Knoblauch, who, again, deserves the benefit of the doubt, he pushed some good buttons and got good results last night, says, we think this is goalie interference. We think Michikov is pushing Stuart Skinner's pad. We're going to challenge this. And it is a gamble in today's NHL if you're not 100% sure. And from a game management perspective, and I tweeted this last night as they were challenging it, I, in all honesty, probably would have just let it go. And I know you don't really want to be down a goal, but with the way the Oilers penalty kill was going up to that point, and the way it was going in this game, frankly, I would have opted to just be down 1-0 as opposed to sending my penalty killers back out there after already conceding a goal on a jam play at the net mouth. With that in mind, the Oilers weren't able to kill off the subsequent penalty that comes off of the review, because now in today's NHL, when you lose the coach's challenge for a review, the other team gets a power play and the Flyers score again. And it's 2-0. It is 2-0 10 minutes into this game. 11 and a half minutes into this game, the Flyers are out shooting the Oilers 9-3. It takes a while for the Oilers to get going. I thought the Flyers did a tremendous job in transition, slowing this game down, forcing the Oilers to commit, forcing the Oilers to work for their offense in a way that not a lot of teams do. And if you listened to yesterday's episode of the show, I wrapped up. That was the last thing I said on the show, is the Flyers are a team the style they play, it can give the Oilers a hard time, because when you make the Oilers turn their backs to you, go behind the net, recover the puck, and then try and break out, the Oilers defense, once you get past Ekholm and Bouchard, it is not particularly adept at breaking out of its own zone. And with that in mind, the Flyers executed their game plan about as reasonably well as you could expect. And this game had a really weird flow to it because of the reviews early on in the game, because of the officials' review where the Oilers had a goal disallowed for goalie interference. You had your fourth disallowed goal through the first 3 games. The Oilers were reaching an inflection point. And it sounds crazy to say that about a team that's, a handful, 7-8 periods into their season with a Stanley Cup favorites. But when you are in a game like this, where you so clearly are feeling that pressure, it is hard to play with controlled emotion. And controlled emotion is the key to being successful in professional sports. I don't think it's a surprise to see great players and really talented players get frustrated with each other, to get frustrated with themselves. And the Oilers were playing with desperation in this game, but it manifested in the wrong ways. The Oilers were pinching very aggressively down from the points to try and maintain offensive zone time and losing puck battles to spring the Flyers going back the other way. I thought Evan Bouchard had a very uneven game. I want to say he had something in the ballpark of 5 of his shots on goal blocked. 5 of his scoring chances blocked. Yes, ultimately he scores the game-tying goal that forces overtime. So all is well. But when you are desperate, you start acting out of structure. You start making plays out of desperation. And you saw it in the 2 fights. I do commend Troy Stecher for stepping up to fight Sean Couturier after Couturier bumped Skinner. And look, do I think Couturier was trying to take a run at Skinner? No. But it's proper etiquette to avoid the goalie. We all understand these goalies are clunky and big, especially when they're out of their net. And it doesn't take a lot to knock them over, because they're never expecting to be hit, because the way the rules are set up, they're not supposed to be hit. And then Corey Perry taking it upon himself to challenge Joel Farabee to a fight. You saw the Oilers' frustration simmering over. You saw it in the Draisaitl penalty, where he cross-checked Garnet Hathaway for no real reason other than he was mad, and he got benched for it for a stretch of the game. And it definitely is not something I would have had the convictions to do. But you got to give Kris Knoblauch credit for saying, well, we might lose this game, but Leon needs to control himself. He is too good of a player to be taking himself off of the ice for 2 minutes because he's frustrated. I would rather you channel that frustration into scoring a goal, into skating. And look, I thought the Flyers did a really good job defensively. And sometimes the other team's just going to play well. And the Oilers really struggled to get going in this game until almost the halfway point, if not further beyond that. It's not really until the Henrique goal that the Oilers started to get some sustained zone time. And I thought that line in particular, Henrique, whether it was with Skinner and Podkolzin, or whether it was with Connor Brown and Stuart and Jeff Skinner, I thought that was the Oilers' most consistent line last night, especially at 5-on-5, because they were keeping it simple. They were getting pucks in deep. They were crashing the net mouth. They were forcing the Flyers to play defense, and it did start to have an impact and start to wear them down. Coming up next, we are going to talk all about how the role players on this Oilers team kept them in the game while the superstars were ironing out the kinks. Coming up next on this edition of Locked On Oilers after this break. If you know anything about me doing this show, you know I love going to live events. Tonight, I will be at Citi Field in Flushing, Queens on a cold October night to see the New York Mets take on the Los Angeles Dodgers. My friends and I, we got our tickets. The only place I buy tickets to get to a game from our friends over at Gametime, with some of the best features in the ticket buying experience, things like the seat view, where you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. I want to be able to see balls and strikes. I want to be able to see the ball in play over the entire field. You got to get an idea of what you're looking at before you buy it. The lowest price guarantee, or Gametime, will credit you 110% of the difference. And Gametime ticket coverage, where your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Today's episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks. With PrizePicks, you can win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Georgia, and Texas. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. PrizePicks puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. My picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. If you are like me, you are dying to see Malik Neighbors get back out there to see if he can get the over on his receiving yards this week. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. It is highly encouraged. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. You don't even need to win to cash out. Go check out PrizePicks today. And thank you to everyone who was hanging out on this Wednesday edition of Locked On Oilers. Late night for me last night. My internet went. My initial plan last night was to record a triumphant victory podcast that the Oilers, they're finally on the board. Nothing like winning in the National Hockey League. You get your first of the season, even if it's not the most pretty. And there was a service outage from my internet provider, so I ended up going to sleep and started to formulate this episode more before I went to sleep, and then got up and started recording. So when you think about it, last night is kind of a paradox in the sense that you don't expect the Oilers to win that type of game. And I mean that in a few ways. Number one, anytime you hold Connor McDavid to 2 shots, anytime you hold Leon Drasaitl to 1 and Zach Hyman to 1, you've done your job as a hockey team. And this is kind of both not ideal in that McDavid and Draisaitl and Hyman were rendered pretty ineffective for a majority of this game. But the fact that the Oilers at least have the depth to hang around in this type of game now when their stars can't go, especially when you're going to run the super line of McDavid, Draisaitl, and Hyman, it is a small validation of this roster construction. When your star players are held, we'll say neutral, it puts your depth in the spotlight. It means your depth players need to be able to make a difference for you. And for the Oilers, their depth was tremendous last night. I want to start. I mentioned him in the first segment, but Stuart Skinner kept them in that game. I know the Oilers' goaltending is always going to be a topic of conversation. People are very skeptical of Stuart Skinner as a franchise goalie, but when he doesn't need to be the difference, he's often more than fine. And last night, genuinely, the Oilers needed someone to step up and keep them in that game. And Stuart Skinner made a pair of really impressive post-to-post saves on breakaways and kept the Oilers in that game when it was 2-0. 3-0 is a lot harder to come back from than 2-0. I know at one point during the game on the broadcast I was watching, they had flashed the live odds and the Oilers were plus 240 at 2-0 to come back. And I felt reasonably good about that from the perspective of the fact that Skinner was playing well. Look, if Stuart Skinner had given up a couple stinkers, I probably would have been a lot more weary of the Oilers' ability to come back in that game last night. But the simple fact was, Skinner was on his game. He kept them in that game. And then the Oilers' depth got to go to work. I was very impressed with Vasily Podkolzin's forechecking. And look, nobody's asking for a second liner to be a crash test dummy, effectively. Nobody's asking Podkolzin to go out there and use his body like a wrecking ball. If anything, playing him up in the lineup, playing him with more talented players like Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, if anything, would tell you, hey, worry more about the offense. But the Oilers really needed to get sustained zone time. And when you have a guy out there who is buzzing, who's throwing the body around, who's making guys be aware he's out there, that starts to wear away. That starts to imprint on people's minds. And same thing, I was very impressed with Jeff Skinner in the offensive zone last night. I felt that Skinner did a really good job of being aggressive on his pinches and putting pressure on the Flyers defenseman or forward who happened to have the puck. And look, Stewart. I'm going to say Stewart when I mean Jeff, and Jeff when I mean Stewart at least 10,000 times over the course of this season. So that's the first one officially with games underway. I was very impressed with Jeff Skinner throwing caution to the wind and being extremely aggressive. And look, we all know Jeff Skinner is not a defensive stalwart. We all understand that he is not going to be a Selke candidate. We understand he's probably going to give a lot of what he creates offensively back in the defensive zone. But the simple matter of the fact is he's a really high-end skater, and he was able to put a lot of pressure on Flyers players just by using his skating, by forcing them to make a decision half a second sooner than they wanted to. And you get a goal from Henrique, and then you get a goal from Connor Brown, and you were at 2-2 with your star players doing next to nothing. That is where I felt reasonably good about this game. And I said it, I tweeted it during the game. If you are in this game on Connor Brown, Jeff Skinner, Adam Henrique, Vasily Podkolzin, and Stuart Skinner, then all we need is one big play from the big dogs. And with the game on the line, they had McDavid, Draisaitl, and Hyman out there. Bouchard ends up scoring the goal. And real quick, I did want to mention this. I forgot to in the first segment, but I know the Oilers' power play did not convert any of their opportunities last night. But after the second one, that kind of gave the Oilers a kick in the butt. That they were in that game. They were putting a lot of pressure on Philly, making the Flyers move left to right, really getting heat on the Flyers. And I know typically we say using special teams as a catalyst to kind of find your game. It did feel like, for me at least, the game started to turn when the Oilers got to the power play and they ran two really good power plays in a row. I know they didn't score. Obviously, that needs to get going. But the simple matter of the fact is the Oilers needed to string together small victories over the course of that game, winning individual shifts, winning consecutive shifts in a row, eventually bleeding over into winning an entire period. The Oilers have enough talent where they can sustain that type of kinetic, high-end offensive energy for long periods of time. If they can run their power play unit and then they'll pull the goalie and get it to 6-on-5, there's nobody else in the entire NHL that can match the Oilers' firepower in a 6-on-5 situation. And the simple matter of the fact is the Oilers' depth kept them in that game, and then the superstars put it away. And I really want to take a moment and say kudos to the depth, man. That is the type of variety of play you need if you're going to win in this league. You need your bottom six to be able to slowly get your feet back in the game. There's no better way to kill another team's momentum than to cycle them in their own zone for 45 seconds to a minute and a half. The Oilers, Skinner, Henrique, Podkolzin, I felt the second and third lines did a really good job of this. And even Corey Perry's line, the fourth line, they had a post in there as well. The Oilers did hit 2 posts and a crossbar very easily, could have scored 3 or 4 more goals in this game. But when you are struggling, all it takes is one. Henrique's goal is ugly. You know, he scores crashing the net on a rebound. It's a backhand. The goalie's not really looking at him. But when you're desperate and you need to get on the board, that is always a great plan. Go to the net and good things happen. If you are in and around that net mouth as an offensive attacking player, all you got to do is have the puck find you. And as Rick Nash once so eloquently put it, the puck finds good players and good players find the puck. And when you are in this type of stretch where you really can't get anything going, you can't get review luck, you can't get puck luck, you feel like everything is working against you, that type of grind it out, crash the net style is going to do wonders for your confidence and your ability to stay in these games because you need offense. And when you are a rush team, you go up and down, back and forth, it is hard to put pressure on the other team for extended periods of time. And it puts more pressure on you. You know, the Oilers, the third goal they conceded, I know it wasn't on the penalty kill, but they struggled on that penalty kill, and the Flyers had a lot of heat on them. And ultimately, it goes in off of Mattias Ekholm, but that goal happens because the Oilers play defense for 2 straight minutes. We are going to take our final break of today's show. When we come back, we're going to tie a bow on the Oilers' first win of the season and diagnose exactly how it all came together. Coming up next on this edition of Locked On Oilers. Hey, NFL fans, you can enjoy the NFL season with a big return over on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. We got the Sean Payton revenge game, the Broncos going down to New Orleans, the Broncos 2.5-point road favorites. Another London game this week, Drake May and the New England Patriots going over to London to take on the Jacksonville Jaguars. The reeling Jaguars are 5.5-point home neutral site favorites. My favorite game of the weekend, though, CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans going up to Green Bay to take on Jordan Love and the Packers. The Packers 2.5-point home favorites. And of course, the Saquon Barkley Bowl, the Philadelphia Eagles going to MetLife Stadium to take on the reeling New York Giants, who lost Andrew Thomas to a Liz Frank foot injury. The Eagles are 3.5-point road favorites. So if you want to get in over on the action and spice up your NFL Sunday, check out FanDuel.com to get started. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Wednesday edition of Locked On Oilers, where we are trying to put together the formula. And right now, it's fair to say the Oilers are ironing some things out. They are trying to figure out what exactly they need to do to win on a consistent basis with this iteration of guys. And I do think we are going to continue to see some experimentation on the back end as far as partners and pairs. I think we are going to see experimentation up front. I think in an ideal world, Kris Knoblauch would not like to play McDavid and Draisaitl together the entire season. I think that was more of a, let's get a shot in the arm. Let's get our team going. Let's find a way to win one game. And as we start to build out our confidence a little bit more, then we can start to discuss, all right, if we split them up again, do we want Skinner with Draisaitl or McDavid? Do we want Nuge with Draisaitl or McDavid? Do we want someone entirely different? And I know McDavid's off to a slow start again, secondary assist on a goal. Nice. It's hard to be mad at McDavid because you know the offense is coming, and I feel he's entitled to a bit of patience. And look, I understand there are people who are going to say the complete opposite, that this is the best hockey player in the world, that any game he only records an assist is a waste. But when you are trying to get going, you got to walk before you can run. And right now, the Oilers are starting to waddle. You know, you think about a toddler learning how to walk. They just got up on their feet. They took a few steps, and they're standing up. They stopped halfway across the room when they were trying to get from point A to point B, but they're still on their feet. And beating a team like the Flyers isn't commendable. The Oilers are supposed to beat teams like the Flyers. And last night is an example of where the Oilers' talent pulled them away. I don't think the Oilers played particularly well last night. I thought they were far too emotional. I thought they were far too desperate. And it almost got away from them. You know, you're down 2-0 on 2 penalty kill goals that you conceded. On 2 power play goals you conceded. And your penalty kill has been bad. Your offense has been non-existent. You only have a handful of goals through 3 games. Coming back from a 2-0 deficit when you can't score probably feels like trying to find water to drink in the desert. And the Oilers are lucky their depth showed up for them yesterday. Their depth kept them in that game and gave them an opportunity to win. And then their high-end guys put it away. You know, McDavid in the overtime sets up Draisaitl. He doesn't score on the breakaway, but he puts that puck in a place where the crashing player behind. I thought at full speed, I thought McDavid hooked the attacking Flyers player in the 3-on-3, but ultimately upon watching the replay, it doesn't really seem that egregious. I felt like it was reasonable to let that go. And then McDavid's off to the races, crashes the net, rebound, Draisaitl scores. It's great. The Oilers need to use this as a launching pad now. They got their feet under them. They got their first win. That's great. Now, let's use our emotions to play with intensity. There is a difference between chaotic and intense. It's a very fine line to walk. There are many players in the NHL who toe that line and go back and forth. The Brad Marchands of the world, the Matthew and Brady Kachucks of the world. There are plenty of players who toe that line between chaos and aggressive. But for the Oilers now, you got your depth guys a good win. You gave them an opportunity, and they took it. You saw Troy Stetcher jump in there to fight because Stuart Skinner got ran. You saw Corey Perry jump in there to fight, to kind of get the juices going, to try and fire the team up because he knows he's not at a point where he can go out there and make a play. And look, do I think the fights are necessary? No. But they went out there and they did it. So I am not in a position to be like, oh, well, there's no need to fight. The fights definitely gave the Oilers a kick in the butt. And now you won a game. Let's find a way to get our big guys going. And whatever that looks like, if that's keeping them together for another game, if that's splitting them up, whatever Kris Knoblauch thinks is the right way to go about it, I think that's the way to go about it because he's continually shown an adept hand at managing his personalities. I don't think another coach would have benched Draisaitl for that cross-check on Hathaway. I think Draisaitl was definitely getting frustrated. He wasn't having a particularly good game. He only had one shot on goal, and he won the game in overtime. Of course, he had one 5-on-5 shot on goal. But when he struggles the way he did last night, it would be very easy to just say, well, he's got to stay out there. He's got to figure it out. I can't bench him. He's too good of a player. But Kris Knoblauch, reading the energy, said, no, we are not going to win if he makes mistakes like that over and over again. And Draisaitl is a player who occasionally goes over that line. And it is an important part of what makes him who he is, that he has that snarl, that aggressiveness to his game. But he's got to use it at the right time. That's the key. There is no problem with being a physical player in professional hockey. It is highly encouraged to be an aggressive player in professional hockey. But you need to use it at a point where A, it's not against the rules, you're not going to draw a penalty, and B, when it's not going to hurt your team. There are times where those types of fights hurt the team because it gives the other team a validation of, oh, we can get to these guys. If we annoy them, they're going to take stupid penalties. Let's keep annoying them. They'll take stupid penalties, and their penalty kill is bad. So I do want to see how the Oilers follow this game up. I'm very curious to see as far as how the Oilers go about managing getting the big guns going, because right now that's my big question mark. You know, they take on Nashville tomorrow. Nashville coming off a pretty bad loss to the Kraken. I believe it was 6-3. And Nashville is another team that is trying to integrate multiple new pieces all at the same time. So I'd be very curious to see how these two heads interact. But that will just about do it for this Wednesday edition of Locked On Oilers. But before we get out of here, if you could be so kind, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please give the show a 5-star review. If you're watching over on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button, hit the alarm bell so you get a notification whenever new content goes live. Leave me a comment. What were you most encouraged with and what were you most discouraged with the Oilers win over the Flyers? I will talk to you guys tomorrow where hopefully the New York Mets are up 2-1 in the NLCS. See you guys then.